So thank you to come to this presentation. Well, I'm totally blown away. I always thought accessibility is totally boring and nobody is interested at all. And it's the last talk of the conference, so totally awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to show you what you can do to improve accessibility. It's turned out to be not a very technical talk, so this is why also the title changed very late, so shortly before the conference in San Francisco. So there will be no live coding or nothing, but I think I can show you a lot of suggestions that what you can do next week in your own applications to improve accessibility very, very easily. So this is the definition of web accessibility. And by looking at already at the yellow lines, words only, it's very clear that this is a totally wide subject. So there is not really a definition. This is basically saying, well, just make it work for everybody. And this is actually pretty hard. And it's very easy to understand that it's enormously hard to get started. And it's just so many things you need to take into account. So, and this is where I want to help you today. It's basically split in two parts, this presentation. First, I would like to address some reactions I get when talking to people about accessibility, which some might correct in some contexts, but mostly not. And I would show you why and how you can get around these problems. Then I would like to show good practices, as I just said, the simple things you can do. And I can show you in a survey how what kind of problems really exist. So this is not only me saying I can prove this. And I would like to introduce some tools to show you how you can verify first in which state your application is, and especially with screen readers, how you can look what the screen reader actually understands from the browser. So I hope this is interesting to you. Problem is I only have 45 minutes, so this is something I definitely can talk for days, and it's still not enough. So it's really, really only a short introduction, and this is only restricted to blind users using a screen reader. And I was working this year for Vaadin in improving exactly this to make Vaadin applications automatically more accessible for screen readers. So in screen reader, maybe who knows what's a screen reader? Who has already worked with a screen reader and actually liked it? So these are beasts. So you will really hope to get IE6 back when you start working with screen readers, because it's so much easier. But, well, it doesn't help, right? So this is now a short introduction that shows a user using one. I need to start at a certain point and I've did it wrong. No, there should be no audio.
Computers is the World Wide Web.
Okay.
And let's say I wanted to go to...
Let's start again. Let's start here.
Right there. But my problem as a screen reader user is I can't. Another application that is used a lot by people who use screen readers is the World Wide Web. And let's say I wanted to go to the trace page. I type it in.
TRACE, here, WASCQEDU.
And hit enter.
Enter. Page has 40 links. Trace Research and Development Center, Graphic Trace Center, College of Engineering, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And what you heard it say is it told me how many links were on the page. It told me the title of the page. Now that said graphic because if the graphics had been on in the browser, there would have been a picture there of that text. And because graphics are off, we use the alt text, which tells me what the graphic would have been. One of the things the screen reader allows me to do is to bring up a list of links so I can really get an overview of just the links on the page. So if I do insert F7,
Links list dialog, links list view, frequently asked questions and
so I can arrow down now and I know that everything I get to is a link.
what's new at the Trace Center. Help using this site. List information and archives.
Screen readers allow me to basically have access to the printed page, which I've had before, but it's mostly been in the form of people reading books to me on tape. There's a lot less time taken now for me to do things. There's a lot less work involved. There's a lot less dependence on others for reading stuff to me. I have done this often enough that I get used to reading pretty rapidly. So one of the things I can do is actually speed up the way in which the screen reader reads. And the
53,
higher the numbers go, the faster it goes.
64, 75, 86, 97, 108, 119.
This is about the speed at which I read. So if I then tab back to the OK button,
OK button. Pause.
and then
Synthesizer text button.
we read the document.
Speech synthesizer demonstration. Is a deal with speech synthesizer. I want to write a short paragraph to the ideas of synthesize speech. Most synthesizers are able to speak a variety of speech rates and a variety of vocal pitches. Many speak with different voices, but some even speak in different languages. Information about screen readers, screen readers, software, and
You understood that, right?
So now you get an impression what this actually means to using a screen reader. First, actually what it really means to have a screen reader available for a blind person, and a little bit about usages. We come back to this again a little bit later. But clearly a screen reader is only one of the many assistive technologies available. There are another one you may have heard is a Braille display, which is a line with dots peeking out that can be then read. It's Braille that is used for such a device. But other disabilities have other requirements I'm unfortunately not able to cover today. So now, hopefully nobody is insulted by this, but it's a perfectly great sample picture. So, toilet. So when looking through the web for a picture that visualizes my understanding of accessibility and the problems with it, I found this one at interfaces.com. It shows a place where accessibility can be a very important thing to do, accessibility important thing to have, and everybody knows. So how on earth can that happen? So this is done by a person, right? So how big was this person? How long was this arm? That he thought this is actually useful what he did. So unfortunately, this is a feeling you will get a lot when you browse the web with a screen reader. You know the things out there, but you just can't reach out of them. So even when interfaces.com specializes on usability, the picture should also transport very well my understanding of unnecessary accessibility problem. I'm sure nobody ever wants to be in such a situation, so it should be very obvious for everybody that he does whatever is necessary to keep others not being in bringing themselves in such a situation. In addition to that, it shows very clearly how easy it would have been to actually prevent that. The actual work to make it wrong and make it right was exactly the same thing. two important points should be very obvious now. So understand the accessibility requirements from the start. For example, which accessibility technology you need to support. In the picture, a regular arm is just too short, so you need to provide the user something that they actually can reach there. And get in touch with users of assistive technologies right from the start. Even when you have such technology available during development, for example, a screen reader, you will be just blown away when you see a user that has to use a screen reader regularly the first time looking through your application. So when you wait too long into the development process of your application, be prepared to do a lot of stuff again. So better don't do it the day before you need to ship. So when listening to others talking about accessibility or reading articles about it, these are some impressions I get. And I would like to debunk them here now. So accessibility requires experts. And this might be very likely true in some cases. So when your application needs to run a government site, so public site paid by tax money, so you need to real verification and certification. This is maybe something when you're not already an expert that you can't do on your own. So really need somebody to help you in this, very likely. But there is a lot of things, as I said, you can do on your own, even without being an accessibility expert, very easily in your daily work. And I have selected now this list from WAI-ARIA. This is Web Accessibility in Mind, that wrote a blog post on 10 things everybody can do to improve accessibility. This is only one of many lists. They roughly cover the same topic, but they may have different focus. But I would like to go quickly through this list. Add alt text to your logo. You have seen it quickly in the video. This menu was just a picture, and this person is really relying on having alt text available. When the alt text is missing, the file name of the picture is red, and this is most of the cases completely useless. So when the picture has a meaning, when it is important in your application to know the content of your picture, write a meaningful alt text. Alt text means add an alt property and an alt attribute and add a meaningful text to it as a value. And when the picture is only for decorative purposes, then still add an alt attribute, but leave it empty. In that case, it is ignored by screen reader. So this is really, really easy to do, and please do so. Then next item in the list were landmarks. So you can divide your application in functional areas. This is only for definition. You have seen in the video how this screen reader user opened a dialog with all the lists of the site. So he can go very easily through all the lists that are available. So this can be also done for landmarks and for headers. Headers would be an alternative to use instead of landmarks. So, for example, you have a header, a search bar, a navigation, and the main area of your application. You define that, and the advantage is that the user can directly jump to this place very easily without going through the whole content before arriving at that place he needs to be. So now, everybody knows what WAI-ARIA is, right? No? Okay. Very, very short introduction. So this is was the original idea to make an introduction to WAI-ARIA, but I thought while preparing it, what I present today is so much better, because WAI-ARIA is kind of cheating So you can do so many things right without depending on WAI-ARIA, which is so much better for the screen reader and in general for accessibility. So, WAI-ARIA, Web Accessibility Initiative, accessible, which are internet applications. Says everything, right? It is created specifically for applications that you create with Quit or Vaadin or using GXT from Sencha or whatever, or your own widgets. For one, an example is when you have a button. Very often it can be seen that for the button a div element is used, but actually there is a button element in HTML instead. But there are some reasons a div element needs to be used, and WAI-ARIA allows to recognize this div element as a button by adding a role to this div element. So when the screen reader finds this role, he knows that it knows that this is meant to be a button and informs the user accordingly. There is no functionality added. This is only for marking this element so that the screen reader announces this element correctly to the user. Another problematic point in our applications is that the content changes dynamically. So a web application originally, and this is where screen readers are mostly built for, it's the page loads and it stays that way, right? Our applications are just not working in this kind of way. So everything changes dynamically, even the content of a smaller area of the application. So in the screen reader needs to know about this. An example for this would be, for example, a dialog or an alert or a tooltip. So this gets added to the DOM and removed from the DOM dynamically depending on user interactivity. So this would be marked in a special way called a live area with WAI-ARIA. So the screen reader knows how to handle this correctly. And it is able to bind elements with WAI-ARIA that are placed in different parts of the DOM. So you can have a text field and a label, for example, bound together. Or you have a tab sheet where in one element there are the tabs, in another element there is the actual content. And with WAI-ARIA you define the tab sheet and the content and which belongs together. So it is all about giving the screen reader or assistive technologies more information about the application, about the HTML page, which is in the end our application. What is the content, and allows a user of a screen reader to actually understand what is in the page and how to use it. The functionality itself, as I said, needs to be provided by the application. So I hope this made it a little bit clearer. Next in line in the list was enhance the focus indicators, and this will be very welcome by users with low vision, but your power users will be very happy about this too, because your power users will use the keyboard to use your application, and when they always know where the focus is, it's very helpful for them too. Our applications have a lot of forms, and of course we mark the fields that are required with a visual element, whatever this is, a red star, for example. So this is visual, which means the screen reader doesn't see it. The solution is to mark this also with WAI-ARIA, ARIA required, and set it to true, so the screen reader informs the user accordingly that he needs to provide a value for this. And this is that needs to be done. Just add the attribute and that's it. So, and add your page title in an H1 element and identify table headers with the right element. And table captions all help to better understand the content of your application. So it is give more context to the HTML, to the DOM that gets created out of this, because this is all what the screen reader sees. Oh yes, my favorite. The links you have seen in the list in the video had all different content or different values text. But when looking through, in Germany, pages like Focus or Stern or something like that, there is a summary of the articles on the first page, and then with a link, and you can get to the next page. And in German, there is everywhere the link weiter or read more or something like this. Everywhere the same. So this is what is then in this list. Is full of read more. So, but where which read more belongs to, it's completely impossible to know. So please decide on better link values that makes it possible for screen reader users to know where which link leads to. Tab index. Who uses tab index with values other than -1, 0, and 1? I was told this is not a good idea. I actually didn't experience it on my own, but these are, I can read it, or I read it on many places that it's better to have only these values in the tab index, and better change the structure of the HTML so that it's not necessary to have the tab index with different values in terms of accessibility. So the last item in the list is a tool to check for problems that I have mentioned. It is called WAVE, and is actually from WebAIM. That can be used either online or as a toolbar for Firefox. And I will demo this hopefully when there is time at the end. So, but these are the things that were listed in the blog post, and there was nothing that is difficult, right? Is there anything that would be provide any problems to your work? So you may not access the HTML directly, other when you use UI Binder. But even when you do your layout still programmatically, which I would not suggest, it's very easy to just add an attribute, right? So you always have access to the element and just provide the attribute there. And for WAI-ARIA, there is very, very good best practices documents on the specification side that lists specific widgets. So when you use a tab sheet, it very clearly it explains what needs to be done in terms of keyboard shortcuts and the general functionality. So continuing with the myths. Yeah, while experience certainly helps in this regard, this is used too often as an excuse, I have the feeling, for not taking accessibility into account. But instead, accessibility is nothing new. Well, this is all these tools and all the understanding that is necessary, all the screen readers, everything is available so long already. So there is so much information, so much experience available for free that you can take advantage of. So please connect to a community, be it online or in your town, where people with disabilities meet. So I will be soon in Tokyo in a meetup. They meet once a month to discuss new technologies that are available for them and problems that they have, and then in the evening they sit together. So I will get so much out of this from my understanding how I can work better to help these people. So when something like this is in your area, I can not suggest enough to actually go there. So the information, experience is available. You just, and they are happy to share this. Accessibility is time consuming and expensive. Yes, it is when you do it late. So really start with accessibility in mind from the beginning. When you're too late, you need to change. You definitely, I promise, you need to change in your application too much. An example in this regard, in this direction, is in GWT, when you want to add history support, so the back and forward button in the browser to support this or deep linking, you do this also from the beginning. Have you tried this to add this for an application that were developed without history support? You will have a hard time to not basically change the application completely. And this is exactly the same with accessibility. So have it in mind from the beginning, and things are so much easier. Then, yeah. Well, this might not be true here in this room because you are so many here. But this is still, I think, interesting to know and interesting to show. So clearly, when somebody wants to be praised publicly for the great work he does, then accessibility might not bring him far, because in the communities, the young guys, the accessibility just doesn't click. And for the suits in your company, they just don't care about accessibility. It's nothing important for them. So, but how I prefer to think about this is that I am able to allow someone to get work in your application because, my God, in your company, because your application is accessible. So your company can actually hire people with disabilities, or a student can actually learn exactly the same way as the other students that have no disabilities. And then your work is so much more important than being cool for 5 seconds or so. So to show what I mean with that is, I would like to show another video. And this is a promotion video from NV Access, which is the company that develops NVDA, which is a screen reader.
I've always had a very big interest in all aspects of computers, not just using a computer, but also how they work and how to make them do things, and computer programming and the like. And so I remember that I used to have my dad reading me computer programming books at about the age of 7 or 8. If I'd had the internet back then, Dad probably would have been able to relax instead of reading me computer programming books. So much of that information is available now just online. And it's actually really interesting to think about how much the internet has really changed my life, and I suspect the lives of many other blind people. Now everything is available online, and no one has to read me the information, no one has to braille it out for me. It's all just accessible whenever I want to access it. And it's one of the biggest reasons that what I do is so important to me. I think everyone should have that kind of access.
So something you heard in the first video too, somebody had to read books to them. So and screen reader gives them the freedom, the ability to actually be not dependent on somebody to read things for them. And even when the content is available on the internet, when it's not accessible, it doesn't help much. So this is something really, really important. And this is why I think accessibility is super cool. Next one is accessibility is hard to do right. And well, this also seems pretty obvious when you look at it the first time. But then it all depends on what is the meaning of the word right. So what I may be able to suggest on doing to make it a little bit easier is to not try to do everything from the beginning. So not to cover whatever is needed to be accessible. Do the small things. Start easy and define one browser, one screen reader, and make this work and start from there to improving over time. So accessibility, have an accessible application is not something you plan in your project plan for doing in 1 week. The accessibility is something that is like automated testing, something that is just part of the whole development process from the beginning until the end. When you want to do it all at once. Available tools are hard to use. Well, this is something you will learn very quickly when you want to use a screen reader the first time. They are really beasts, but they are so enormously powerful. How I learned to actually get along with these tools is to actually watch people using them. And I had the pleasure to work together with Marco C. from Mozilla and with Jari Mikkola from the Finnish Federation of the Visually Impaired. They looked through sample applications that I prepared and parts of the application that I created, and showed me every little tiny bit of problem that existed. So that I would have never thought about this, that first, that this problem exists at all, and second, how to solve it so easily, because they are confronted with the problems constantly, so they actually know. And with a Braille display, they could look at the HTML directly, and they understood the HTML. So they could help me very, very specific what is wrong in the HTML. And it was so easy to actually find the right place in the application to make this change. So this is the second thing I can suggest. Get someone who is using this technology that you want to support in your application very early in your application development process, and let him check your application regularly. Or when you create widgets, let him check the widgets alone and see if the widgets as such are accessible. And because with the widgets, you define the usability in general, and in the application structure and such, as I have shown with the landmarks, and also can be done with headers. And that if the structure is actually useful in the links that you use. And yeah, one problem we had in the beginning, we needed support from the screen reader vendor, which was Freedom Scientific, which they developed the screen reader JAWS, and they just outright refused to give us support. So we had trouble, we connect them, and they just reported, well, we don't do support, this kind of support. In contrast to that, we used NVDA also, and there was a problem with Firefox. Neither Marco C nor I could find, so we connected NVDA, they looked at it, and at the next day we got the information what the problem was. Marco C understood that this is a problem of the Firefox itself. The next week it was fixed in Firefox source. So that's amazing, this is how things should work. So when you have a chance to not support JAWS, I would suggest to do so. So these are the myths. When you read them without this information, I think is enough information not to care about accessibility at all. But I hope I gave you enough information to make this easy to handle. So now something more practical, with some HTML at least. So I should already have mentioned that the screen reader only sees the DOM of the page. So to make it easier for a screen user to find his way through the application, please provide a header structure and or landmarks. I already mentioned that. And this is how you do it. You have once the role main and the role search as example for landmarks. And this is how you add them. And you actually have there also a link to the specification. And then the button. This is how a button should look like in principle. But there are just reasons this is not possible. So you add a role button to it so the screen reader knows. So the next thing I suggest you to care and to look at is that you just unplug the mouse and try to use your application only from the keyboard. And you will see very easily, very quickly, how hard it is to actually use your application. And using a screen reader is exactly the same thing. They don't have the mouse available, so they just can't use it. They just can't point with a mouse to some element. So remove the mouse, then you are basically in the same situation, and that way you can fix the problems very easily. The next problem I've fought a lot with is when you have mouse over only content. This is luckily, thanks to the mobile devices, on the way out. But when you have these things, then you have the possibility to add an ARIA live with priority with which this information should be read out. And with ARIA relevant, you can define which part of the change is interesting. If the whole area, the content of the whole live area should be read, or only that part that has actually changed. So I would like to show two screenshots from the survey I mentioned in the beginning, which is done by WebAIM. This looks like presentation prepared from somebody from WebAIM. I'm not, but the tools from there are just so helpful. And they make surveys for screen reader users, low vision users, and for users with motor disabilities. So here you see the usage of screen readers, and it clearly shows that JAWS is on the way down. It looks like Internet Explorer. And NVDA and VoiceOver is on the way up. VoiceOver, you may know, is from Apple for the macOS 10 and for iOS. And here's the problems. This is also from the survey, and there you see what is really difficult. The first one, Flash, second, capture, is basically very easy to understand. But then, which is next? Ambiguous links we had, and missing alt property we had, and then complex or difficult forms. So this is all things you really need to watch out in your application. Then these are the main things I thought up for screen reader use. This is what I had, what was I running into. But of course, these things are also very helpful. Zoomability. So allow the user to use the zoom function from the browsers. That is very helpful. And make sure that the color contrast of the font of the elements is big enough so that it is easy readable. Color values, think about colorblind people. And actually captions for video for deaf people is extremely helpful. Please don't forget these things. So now I would like to do some demo this time. Duplicate. first wave. Wave is there. Not there. Okay, so let's say GWT.create.com. So you just enter the URL to your application, and then it looks through the HTML and finds problems. So you see, I haven't checked this before it went public, and you will see what the problems are in that way. The image alternative text is not present, and this is a picture that was overlooked from the designer because this is only added for Facebook. It is never visible and actually not even useful to know about this picture at all. And then you have some kind of information about this, and then links to the 508. This is a US company. And then it also visualizes the structure, the header structure of your application here. That is also very helpful to have. Then Firefox DOM Inspector. This is a little bit older. It's only available in the tools. Oh no, wrong. Web Developer, DOM Inspector. So there you have, I didn't know this, accessible events and accessible tree that you can select. And then you have the accessible object available, the properties and the relations. So it is basically everything that you enter in the HTML, you can check if this is actually recognized by the browser. And when the browser recognizes, it should be actually forwarded correctly to the screen reader. So here, when something is not right, basically, for example, the label for an element is not read correctly, then you can look here at the name column. What is the content here? When this content is missing, then the connection in HTML is not correct. So the browser doesn't find, for example, the label for a text field. Where am I? Yes. Chrome Accessibility Audit, Chrome Developer Tools. There is a plugin available, Accessibility Tools from the marketplace. And then when you install this, you have an accessibility checkmark here. So in going to GWT.create.com again, and run this, then you get here information about things that are not right. And here images should have an alt attribute is also provided here, so you can go very easily through. This is all the speaker pictures. Okay. Yeah, that would be interesting. Have been interesting to know which speaker is on the picture. Then the next one is also Firefox. And this is the old one, so it's only available. So you press the Alt key that you get access to the old menu, and then you have here funcs available. And funcs shows the content of a web page as it would be said by the screen reader. So also here, GWT.create.com. And then let's see, funcs. So this is basically a visualization what the screen reader sees. So here you can check if your structure is right, if your alt texts are correct, if your links are read correctly. And then you have a headings list, so you can check this too, and a link list. in a visual way. So you don't need to go to a screen reader to actually get to this information and see if it is correct or not. You see, this is a linked list and it's a permalink, full with permalink, so this is not very helpful when used with a screen reader. This is exactly what I was talking about. So, to the rest. So far for today. So I hope I could give you some tips and ideas what you can do. And as I said, this is really only the beginning. It is easy to get started with these ideas. When you get connected to the community, you can learn over time and become an expert on your own over time. And just start simple in your application and grow over time. Keep looking at it continuously. Oh, one more thing. We are in a GWT conference, right? And of course, GWT supports WAI-ARIA, and you use it in that way that you access the class roles that provides all the roles statically. And when you select a role, then you can access the properties and states that are defined in WAI-ARIA, and you just provide the element where the attribute should be added and then the value of the attribute. So it's really easy to handle the attributes and basically update also the states, because everything is done for you and accessible in an easy way. So you remember this picture, right, from the beginning? So I hope you don't see this anymore only as funny. I hope you see the problems such a thing creates, not only in that way, even in other contexts. And I actually hope that every time you visit this place, you think about accessibility from now on. But I have please do me a favor, really, don't go overboard. So thank you for your interest today. Thank you for coming, and hope you will start using accessibility from now on. We are unfortunately out of time for questions.